It is the middle of July, 91 degrees in the shade, not a breath of wind, the kind of afternoon where the English go and stand in front of their open refrigerator door just to feel the cold. And down at the bottom of my cellar steps, in the dark, there sits a brown stoneware, crock the size of a milk pail. Inside that crock is pork my family butchered last November, 8 months ago. No ice, no electricity, no refrigerator has ever touched it. And tonight I am going to carry a good piece of it up those stairs, fry it in a pan, and feed it to my grandchildren the way my grandmother fed it to me. Stay with me. My name is Mammi Sarah. I am Amish, and I have lived on this farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania my whole life. I have raised 7 children, and I have buried a husband, and in all those years I have never once owned a refrigerator, not for a single day. We butcher a hog in the cold of November, and we eat that meat clear through the following August, right through the hottest part of the summer, and in more than 40 years of keeping house this way, not one bite of it has ever made a soul at my table sick. I am going to show you exactly how it is done, in the order I do it, with what it costs and where to put it. And then I am going to tell you the part that should make you a little uneasy, which is that this is not some lost secret. It is written down. Your own great-grandmother knew it. And there is a reason nobody thought it was worth teaching you, and the reason is that there is no money in a crock of lard. Let me start with what almost everybody gets wrong, because if you do not understand this one thing, none of the rest will make any sense to you. Meat does not go bad because it is warm. I know that sounds backward. You have been taught your whole life that warm meat spoils and cold meat keeps, and so you think cold is the thing that saves it. But cold is not what saves it. Cold only slows down the thing that ruins it. Meat goes bad because of 3 things, and only 3. Air, water, and time. The little living things that rot your meat, the bacteria, they need air to breathe and they need water to live, the same as any creature does. Take away the air, take away the water, and it does not matter nearly so much how warm it is, because you have taken away the 2 things, the spoiling needs to happen at all. A refrigerator only does one of those 3 jobs. It fights the time by slowing everything down with cold. But it leaves the air and it leaves the water. That is why the meat in your icebox goes slimy in a week, even though it is cold the whole time. We do it the other way around. We go after the air and the water directly. And once you have done that, the cool of a cellar is all the help you need. This is what we have always done. My grandmother had a spring house, a little stone building built right over the cold water that came up out of the ground, and the water ran along a trough in the floor at 52 degrees the whole year round, summer and winter both. She kept her crocks in there, sitting half in that cold running water, and she never gave it another thought. My grandfather had a smokehouse out back, and every winter he hung his hams and his bacon up in the smoke, and my mother, when I was a girl, kept a great brown crock of sausage down the cellar under a seal of white lard, and she would send me down those steps in the dark with a spoon to dig out what she needed for supper. I was frightened of that cellar as a child. I am not frightened of it now. Now I understand that it is the most honest kitchen in the house, so let me show you the crock, because the crock is the heart of it, and it is the one any family can do, even without a spring or a smokehouse. You are going to need 3 things, and they are cheap, and you likely have 2 of them already. The first is salt. Plain coarse salt, the kind they sell for pickling and canning in a box for $2 or $3. Not the fine table salt with the powder mixed in to keep it from clumping. Plain, coarse, pure salt. The second thing is fat, which we render into lard. And if you are butchering your own animal, that fat costs you nothing at all because it comes off the same hog. If you are not, a butcher will sell you a good bit of pork fat for $1 or $2, or you can buy lard already rendered. And the third thing is a crock. A stoneware crock, the glazed brown kind, or a wide-mouthed glass jar, if that is what you have. A crock will last you 100 years and get handed down to your grandchildren, so I count it as free. But if you must buy one, that is the only real cost, and you buy it once in your life. Salt, fat, and a crock. Call the whole business $7, and most of that $7 you will still have next summer. Here is how it goes, step by step. You start with the meat cooked, not raw. We take the pork, the sausage, the pieces off the shoulder and the side, and we cook it down slow and thorough in its own fat in a heavy pan or a kettle until it is cooked all the way through and giving up its juices. While that is happening, you have your salt working for you. Before you ever cook a piece of meat you mean to keep, you salt it well. You rub the coarse salt right into it and let it sit in a cool place, and the salt goes to work, pulling the water up out of the meat. You will see it. You will come back and there is a puddle of brine drawn right out of the flesh, sitting in the bottom of the pan. That water is your enemy, and the salt has pulled it out where you can pour it away. Let me say a word here about the lard, because the seal is only as good as the fat you make it from, and this is a step folks like to rush. To render lard, you take your pork fat, cut it up small, and set it in a heavy kettle over the lowest fire you have, or the back of the wood stove where it is barely warm. You do not fry it. You melt it, slow, over an hour or two, until the fat runs out, clear as water, and all that is left of the solid bits are little brown cracklings floating on top. You strain those out, and you save them, for they are good sprinkled on greens or in a biscuit, nothing wasted on this farm. What is left is clean, rendered lard, and when it is hot, it is thin and golden, and that thinness matters, because a thin hot lard seeps down into every gap around your meat where a thick one would bridge over the top and leave a hollow pocket of air underneath. A hidden pocket of air is the one thing that will spoil an otherwise good crock. So take your time and pour your lard hot and thin and let it settle down into everything before it hardens. Now, while your meat is still hot, you pack it down tight into your crock. Tight, with no gaps, pressing it down so there are no pockets of air trapped in between the pieces. And then comes the part that does the real work. You take your rendered lard, hot and liquid, and clear like honey, and you pour it right over the top of the packed meat, slow, letting it seep down into every little crack and crevice, until the meat is not just covered but drowned. You want a good 2 inches of pure white fat standing over the top of the meat when it is done, a solid cap, sealing everything below it away from the world. Then you set the crock somewhere cool, the cellar floor, the spring house, the coldest corner of the coldest room in your house, down low where the cool settles, and you let the lard go hard. As it cools, it turns from clear liquid to solid white, and it seals that crock like wax seals a letter. Now think about what you have done. Under that fat, there is no air. The meat is packed so tight and covered so deep that not one bubble of air can get to it. And with no air, the things that would rot your meat simply cannot live. They suffocate. That is the whole trick. That is 200 years of knowing, right there in a brown crock on a cellar floor. Now there is one more thing about the crock that nobody ever thinks to mention, and it is the thing that trips up a beginner more than any other, so listen close. A crock is not a jar you open once and empty. You go to it again and again, all summer, digging out a supper's worth at a time, and every time you dig, you break the seal. So here is the rule my mother drummed into me. When you take meat out, you take it from one spot, you make a clean hole down through the fat, you lift out what you need, and then you must mend the seal before you walk away. You set that crock back near a low warmth just long enough for the top of the lard to soften, and you smooth it back over the hole with the back of a spoon, so the fat closes over the meat again like water closing over a stone. Never, ever leave the meat sitting open to the air with the fat cracked around it. An open crock spoils in days. A mended one keeps for months. I have seen many a young wife blame the method when the fault was only that she forgot to close the door behind her. Close the door. Smooth the fat back. That is the difference between meat in August and meat in the barn cat's dish. And a word for those of you with no cellar and no spring house, because I know most of you live in town. You do not need a stone cellar. You need the coolest, steadiest, darkest spot you can find, down low, where the summer heat does not reach. The bottom shelf of a north-facing pantry. A cool basement corner far from the furnace. Some of the old folks kept their crock in a wooden box sunk into the shady side of the ground, or lowered on a rope into a dug well to sit just above the water where it is always cool. The steadier and the cooler the spot, the longer your meat keeps. 50 to 55 degrees is what you are after. Warmer than that, and it will still keep a good while, but not the whole summer, so know your spot and eat accordingly. Let me tell you the why of it, in plain words, because I think you deserve to understand it and not just do it. There is a fancy name the food men use. They call it water activity. And there is another one. They call it an anaerobic seal. And I do not bother much with the Latin of it. Here is the plain truth underneath the fancy words. The salt does two jobs. It pulls the water out of the meat, and it also pulls the water right out of any little bacteria that try to grow, and a bacterium with the water pulled out of it cannot do a thing to you. That is your first line. Then the lard cap does the second job. Rot, the ordinary kind that turns meat green and slimy, is mostly done by little creatures that must have air to breathe, the same as you and I. Bury them under 2 inches of fat and you have taken their air away, and they die. This is not some backwoods Amish invention, mind you. The French have done this exact thing for hundreds of years, and they have a fine word for it. The Germans, my own people came from, did it. Every farming people on this earth who had a pig and no icebox figured out that meat cooked and sealed under its own fat keeps for the better part of a year. It kept armies fed. It kept farms fed through winters that would freeze you where you stood. It is one of the oldest and most tested ways of keeping food that mankind has ever found, and it works exactly as well today as it did the day my great-great-grandmother carried the knowing of it across the ocean in her head. Now, I have to be honest with you, and I am going to be more careful here than anywhere else, because this is food, and food done wrong can hurt a person, and I would rather you trust me than be impressed by me. This method works, but it works because of the whole of it, not one piece of it. It needs the cool place. A crock of meat under lard, sitting in a cellar at 55 degrees will keep for months. That same crock set on a warm kitchen counter in the sun will not, and I will not tell you it will. It needs the salt, done properly and not skimped on, because the salt is half the work. It needs the meat cooked through first and packed while hot and sealed with no air left under the fat. And it needs your good sense. This is old wisdom, and it is sound wisdom, but I am a grandmother, not a doctor, and the world today is not the world my grandmother salted meat in. So here is my honest rule, and I want you to hear it plainly. If you are going to learn this, learn it properly from someone who knows. Start small, keep it cold, and use plenty of salt. And if you ever go to that crock and something is off, if the fat has cracked and let air in, if there is a smell that is sour or wrong, if anything about it makes you pause, you do not taste it to check. You give it to the barn cats or you bury it, and you lose the meat and keep your health. Meat is cheaper than a doctor. Anybody who tells you there is no risk in preserving food is selling you something, and anybody who tells you the old ways were foolish has never watched a family eat well through a hard winter with the power lines down. The truth is in the middle, where the truth usually is. Respect it, do it right, and it will feed you. So then, let me ask you the question I have been circling. If this is so old, and so sound, and so cheap, why did nobody ever teach it to you? Why did your mother not know it, and her mother maybe only half remember it? I will tell you what I think, and it is not a wild story, so do not go thinking Mammi Sarah has got strange ideas down on the farm. Think for a minute about who makes money when you believe that food can only be kept cold, and that cold can only come from a machine that runs on electricity. The men who build the refrigerators make money, and then they make more money selling you a bigger one, and then again when it breaks. The men who run the wires to your house make money on every hour that machine hums. The great grocery stores make money because a family that cannot keep its own meat must come back to the store every few days and buy it fresh, again and again, all summer long. There is a whole long chain of cold, from the slaughterhouse to your kitchen, and every link in that chain has a handout. Now, I do not believe there was ever a meeting where wicked men sat around a table and agreed to make you forget how to salt a ham. I do not believe in that kind of conspiracy. What I believe is something quieter, and in a way something sadder. It is that nobody in that whole long chain has the least reason to remind you. There is no company anywhere that gets rich teaching you to fill a crock with lard once a year and never need them again. So the knowing just faded, the way a path grows over when nobody walks it, not because anyone tore it up, but because everyone had somewhere else they were being paid to go. And here is the bigger thing, the thing I most want you to carry away from an old woman's kitchen. When you know how to keep your own food, you are free in a way that is hard to explain to somebody who has never felt it. The power can go out for a week in an ice storm, and my cellar does not care. The store shelves can go empty, and my family still eats. I do not lie awake, wondering what happens if the machines stop, because on this farm the machines never started. That is not a small comfort. Our bishop said something once that has stayed with me all these years. He said a people who cannot feed themselves are not truly free, no matter what else they own. I think there is a great deal in that. A refrigerator is a fine and useful thing, and I am not here to tell the English to throw theirs out. But a family that has forgotten every single way of keeping food, except the one that needs a wall plug, has traded something precious away and got a convenience in return, and I am not sure they know what the trade cost them. My grandmother knew how to feed her family through anything the good Lord sent. That is worth more than a cold box in the kitchen. It is worth remembering. So here is what I want you to do. Come this fall, when the weather turns cool and it is butchering time, you do not need a hog. Start with a few pounds of good pork shoulder from a butcher you trust. Salt it well with plain coarse salt, $2 or $3 a box, and let the salt draw the water out. Cook it down slow and thorough in its own fat. Render your lard or buy it. Pack that hot meat tight into a clean stoneware crock, pressing out every pocket of air. Pour your hot lard over the top until there is a good 2 inches of it standing white and solid over everything, sealing the whole business away from the air. Set it in the coolest, darkest, lowest place you have and let it harden. That is your afternoon. $7, most of which you keep. And on some hot night next July, you can go down and dig out a piece of it and fry it up, and feed your family food you kept with your own 2 hands and no help from anybody, and I promise you it will taste better for that than anything you ever carried home in a plastic bag. Tell me in the comments below where you live and whether anybody in your own family, a grandmother, a great aunt, an old neighbor, ever kept food this way. I love to hear these stories, and I read every single one of them. So many of you have written to me with a little piece of knowing your own people held on to, and every one of them is a treasure. And if you try the crock this fall, come back and tell me how it went. I want to hear it. The folks in my community already know all this. I am setting it down for the folks outside of it, the ones who were never told. Next time, I am going to show you what my grandmother did to keep her butter and her milk sweet and cold all through August with no icebox at all, using nothing but a clay pot, a piece of cloth, and a shady spot by the back door. It is the simplest thing in the world, and it will keep your butter firm on the hottest day of the year, and I will wager not one person in 100 remembers how it is done. I will show you. Until then, keep your salt dry, keep your cellar cool, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.